Basketball for you on this day. Basketball, football, but Kara and I are here to talk about basketball. Let's talk about this game that just was, this Michigan State-Baylor game, because Baylor has been impressive all year long, really, and especially second half of the first half and the second half tonight, and Jonathan Motley really is the key to that.
There's no question this Baylor team kind of had their coming-out party on the tip-off marathon, really throttling Oregon on their home court. And Scott Drew has done a terrific job with this team. The player that has stood out here in Atlantis has been Jonathan Motley, the power forward. How good has he been? Nobody's had an answer for him one-on-one. Now, remember, this is a depleted Michigan State front court. They don't quite have the size that we're used to them seeing, but you combine the size and the athleticism that Jonathan Motley gives you on that front line. You can see there are guys there. He just has the ability to shoot and to finish over them. So I've been very impressed with this Baylor team, and particularly early on in the season. It's very difficult to find a team where everyone understands their roles. What do we hear from coaches early on in the season? Well, we're still trying to figure it out. We're trying to find who our leader is. We're trying to figure out who's our guy down the stretch. Baylor knows that Jonathan Motley is their go-to guy. They know they have a terrific defense with length, and Manu LeConte at the point guard position has done a great job in terms of taking care of the basketball, but also giving 8 assists. The guy, though, to me, that I've been really impressed with in this tournament has been Ish Wainwright. He has 8 assists today. He has 0 turnovers. So they've just got a complete basketball team that's playing really well right now.
You know what's interesting? We're watching this game in the green room as it progresses, and Michigan State looks great in the first half. I mean, as good as we've seen Tom Izzo's team play all year long. And then here comes Baylor right before the end of the first half. They make a run to get this game within single digits, and then they blow them out in the second half. But we're watching in the second half, and I say, what is going on with Michigan State? And you say they're young. Every team is young, though. I mean, in this day and age in college basketball, coaches have to overcome that, don't they?
They do, but it's very hard to overcome youth very early in the season. They have to play their way through some of these mistakes. And you look at Tom Izzo's team, and I had a chance to watch Michigan State practice a couple weeks ago and visit with Tom Izzo, and he was nervous about the non-conference portion of his season because they're playing so many tough teams, and you're putting these young guys in so many environments. I mean, there was a stretch during that second half where you had Cassius Winston, who was a point guard who's a freshman. You had Miles Bridges, who was really your only offensive threat on the floor. You had Nick Ward on the floor. You had Langford on the floor. I mean, this is just as tough as it can get. And, oh, yeah, you've got Duke coming up in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, a game at Cameron Indoor. So, no, not excusing some of the things and some of the mistakes that Michigan State made today, but you have to know that they have a front court they weren't planning on having. They thought they would have Gavin Schilling. They thought that they would have Ben Carter. And so you're throwing some of these guys to the wolves, so to speak. Miles Bridges was spectacular. He's a tremendous player.
I mean, you mentioned Miles Bridges, 7 of 12 shooting. He had 5 rebounds, 3 block shots, getting it done on both sides of the court. So at least that's a lone bright spot for this Michigan State team that Tom Izzo can look at and say, I really like the way this kid's developing, right?
Yeah, you can build around him, but he needs more help. I mean, he needs more help. But you look at his versatility, and that's what I've been the most impressed with early on, is how many different ways that this guy can score. He can knock down the three-point shot. You see this little mid-range game. He's also comfortable dribbling into his pull-up jumper, and he is electric in transition. A matchup nightmare at the 4 position, which is where he's having to play because of that depleted front court. So here's a guy that moving forward is going to continue to grow and continue to get better. Michigan State will go, and they will grow, and they will ascend as their young players ascend. And they have nice pieces, but right now it's just tough going up there in East Lansing.
We've got some time here before we get to our next game coming up at the bottom of the next hour. So I do want to talk about this whole idea of scheduling, because it seems like, you know, football fans are watching football. They kind of got an eye on college basketball, and they're seeing a lot of teams lose a lot of games. The UConns of the world. Now we're seeing Michigan State at 3-3. You've got, out west, Oregon, off to maybe a tougher start than some people thought they might be. How will this benefit teams down the road when you play this tough non-conference schedule in November, you think?
Well, you get exposed, and that's the biggest thing, is you find a lot out about your team very early on in the season. And I think that's what you want to do if you have a young team, is to find out where are your weaknesses, where do you need to improve. The other thing that losses do is it gets your guys' attention. It gets their attention for you to be able to teach, for you to be able to practice. And so there's no question that Tom Izzo will have his team's full attention. But as far as, you're right, I think it's the youth all across the country, and you're having to you want to challenge your players, and we're seeing some loss. With UConn, it's a little bit different. It's youth combined with injuries. Injuries will wreak havoc on your team, and certainly having Terry Larrier out for the season with an ACL, that has hurt UConn's cause.
I guess if you're Kevin Ollie, you look at it and say, okay, at least now I know I don't have Larrier for the rest of the year. I've got to deal with what I've got right now in November before the conference schedule starts in January. We know that Baylor now advances to the championship game down in Atlantis. Who will they play? We'll find that out next. Wichita State taking on a Louisville team. And, Carol, when we look at this Louisville team by the numbers, they've obviously had a great deal of success. There's Coach Pitino.